Hey guys, it's Steph here, and this is probably my fourth time trying to record this. What I'm here for is to talk about the Gabby Petito case. By now, even more time has passed, so most people are aware of who she is, but I am just two things. I'm mind boggled by the fact that there was body cam evidence and so many signs of her. If anyone who's been through emotional, verbal abuse and control, we all see what was going on there. We all were able to see it if you look on YouTube and places where people can comment. It's just so evident. And then the assessments, even from professionals who do body language expert type stuff, there's some YouTube guys, they all came to the conclusion that he was in fact scared and that he was protecting himself. And so this video is really kind of a little bit of a breakdown of what's going on with that. And I guess the silver lining is just that unfortunately Gabby's no longer with us. She was an angel. Her passing is not in vain, because I think what's the silver lining in this that I'm seeing now is that experts who do know about this type of abuse are now coming forward and saying, oh my gosh, this could have been prevented. So if you don't know, for whatever reason, who she is, basically 22-year-old, beautiful young woman who was traveling the US with her boyfriend in their van. She was a vlogger. He wasn't very supportive, but he showed up in many of her videos on Instagram and YouTube, and she was doing really well, but this was new to her. He was, again, unsupportive. You know, they were confined in a van traveling the US, and I think that that would be tricky for any even super healthy relationship. But they started having problems, and there were witnesses who saw them fighting and called the police for domestic violence, and they saw him slapping her. The police tracked them down, pulled him over on the side of the road, and the body cam footage that I just mentioned, that body cam footage shows what I see is a young woman who's scared to death. She's been crying. Her voice is scratchy from probably screaming, crying, who knows what. And immediately when they pulled them over, there was a skittish van scenario where they bumped on the side of the road, like bumped up onto the sidewalk or something like that. She immediately, like within, I don't know, 15 seconds, started blaming herself. Like, the reason why that happened is I distracted him. We were fighting. Like, just throughout the whole thing, she immediately started taking the blame, which is what people who are in emotionally abusive and controlling relationships over a long period of time, and they'd been together, I think, at least 3 years, something like that, you just fall into that habit of always being careful not to trigger the other person, not to allow them to get into trouble. You're covering, just constantly covering. And so that was what really stood out to me. And then what was interesting is then when they started questioning him, they separated her, put her over there in the truck to cool off, asked her some questions. But with him, they kept him outside. We're talking to him, and he was very calm and cool. He immediately started talking about her reactiveness, telling her she should calm down. She gets worked up, truly blaming her, then belittling her, saying, well, she has this little blog thing she's trying to do. I think at that point she had probably hit over 1 million followers, so it wasn't really a little thing, but it just was a big indicator of how he didn't support her. And imagine going across country with this being your main goal, is to, to record these beautiful sites, to vlog on it, take pictures. And the pictures were beautiful. She did a great job, but clearly the pictures that we saw were not the whole truth, which nobody's surprised. Social media is very much about creating its own reality. But what was even more disturbing is that, as you see through this video, he's blaming her. They're asking him about scratches on his face. instead of thinking, oh, well, this is her defending herself, they're thinking she's coming at him. Again, this is after they showed up because somebody reported him slapping her in public, which is like, it's as though they just completely forgot all of that. They didn't even talk to her about that piece, like, oh, someone mentioned you were being slapped in public. Like, I don't understand how that didn't come up. So she's trying to remain calm. She keeps taking the blame for everything. And then he's over there schmoozing these police officers and being really overly friendly, not concerned about her. And by the end of all of this, you see that they've determined that she's having some sort of mental health breakdown. The two are clearly not good together in confined spaces and need a break from each other. So instead of sending her to like a hotel room or something, they choose him. He's the victim. He gets sent to a free hotel room so they can have time out. You don't see him. So this 22-year-old beautiful girl is stuck in this van by herself, and you don't see him at all concerned. This is his fiance. He's not concerned that she's going to spend the night alone. He's smiling, like victorious, like he got away with something, or he's whatever. We don't know. But if you're following the case, you know that they found her body 3 weeks after this video. And for me, there's so many red flags. And you just think, well, if somebody who had a clue about the hidden abuse, the emotionally abusive, controlling, isolating, financially abusive, like all of those things. I mean, this was her van that she paid for. She apparently wasn't even allowed to drive it. So like that right there for me, it would be a problem. I mean, it's her van, it's her dream. She's pursuing it, and he's not even letting her drive her own van. This is very strange. And then he locked her out that same day, and she mentioned that to the police officers. And again, like, why didn't they talk to him about locking her out? Was this true? Was this not true? Did he slap her? Like, you don't see any of that conversation. At least I haven't. And then what was really upsetting, apart from the fact that this could have been prevented somehow if somebody knowledgeable had been there and said, listen, you two kids are like, a hot mess. Like, you can't be together. Like, I know they're adults technically, but trying to say, who can we call? Even if she's just having, a mental breakdown, if that's what they determined, which is very common because you're being instigated by the abuser. So he said something about her being OCD and him bringing sand into the van. Well, a lot of these types of relationships, that would be an opportunity to even intentionally do so to get a rise out of her and to try to make her feel crazy. I know it sounds strange, but if you know these cases, they're pretty classic. Like, they get an energy hit. Like, it makes them happy to get a rise out of the other person. Like, that is truly something they enjoy, and it's part of that cycle of violence and what they do. And there's so much more out there about this type of abuse, and I'm not a psychologist. I have a podcast that's been out there for 6 years about this type of abuse. I've interviewed many women and experts, and I've been in support groups myself, and it's just classic. And so then the other thing, it just shows how misinformed so many people are, or undereducated, uneducated. These body language experts did a breakdown of that same video. This was before her body was found. They did a breakdown of that video, and all 4 men determined that with his body language, he was scared. He was self-protective. He was all these different things. And they determined that she was the instigator abuser. And in those comments, anybody who had anyone in their life or had experienced this type of abuse themselves was like, guys, you are so far off the mark. She is a victim of abuse, probably long-term abuse based on all these different behaviors, taking the blame, covering for him belittling her, physical reaction, like just being in that like almost hyper exhausted, broken down state where she probably hasn't had any peace since, whatever the last time was before they started fighting. So being in that like hopeless cycle of like, it's almost like a mania, and you do look crazy and you feel crazy, and she may not have even slept the night before. She might have been crying. Lack of sleep deprivation, anxiety, depression, isolation and control. And like this cycle goes on, and it just slowly over time wears you down. So what was interesting was seeing all the comments berating these experts who are trained by the FBI, MI6 or whatever it's called in England. Like they've worked on major governmental projects and, have all this knowledge, and yet no clue about any of the very obvious signs. And for the people who know about this type of abuse, she really is kind of a classic case. And this is just my observation. Again, I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm excited because now you're seeing the experts come out and say the same thing, which means that Gabby, he's on the run. The FBI is trying to find him. Her body was found. He arrived at his parents' house in her van. Okay, without her, and never explained why. Part 2, I had to stop there because there was something beeping in my oven with my daughter. So what I was saying is that the experts were being berated in the comments, and then what I'm excited about is that real experts on this type of abuse are now coming forward and saying, yeah, she has all these classic signs, and her life could have been spared if they had recognized it and taken different actions. And in my opinion, it seems like there would have been a way to potentially even say, okay, you two need to cool it. Even though they're adults, you can always say, is there somebody that is a relative or somebody that we can call for you so that they could maybe come and get you or help you? Like, let someone else know what's going on, because with this type of abuse, there's the cloak of, it's a hidden thing. I mean, in my opinion, I started this podcast about this topic almost 7 years ago, and it's, I think it is a hidden or silent epidemic. And it's almost a contract between the abuser and the victim. And I think the victim often doesn't even realize that they're a victim because they're so being blamed that they think there's something broken with them and they're not able to do anything right. They can't, everything they do in the relationship is wrong. They're blamed for everything. They're just not good enough. And it's combined with enough love and positive feedback and love bombing that they stay, and then they get caught in this trauma bond, which is a physiological mental connection to their abuser. So they don't, if you're not aware of it, that there are times that it feels like struggle and you're sad and depressed and I wish we didn't fight as much, or I wish I didn't bother him so much, or I wish I was better at XYZ, or I wish I cleaned the house better, I wish I took care of the kids better, I wish I was a better partner. And you start focusing on yourself as the problem when really there's nothing you can do that's going to be good enough, not for this type of person. And I think that sadly with relationships like this, from what I've seen, one, they don't know they're being abused. Two, even if they have the sense of, well, this isn't right, because the Brian type, which is her boyfriend's name, they're such charmers. They look outwardly like loving, caring. I mean, you look at their pictures, it looks like he's on the road with her, he's on board, literally, with her agenda, supporting her. They're talking about where they're traveling, and he's posing in the pictures with her. You'd never know with these sweet pictures that there's all this fighting going on behind the scenes, and that is true for most of these scenarios. The outward picture is lovely, beautiful people, beautiful home, beautiful children, perfect life, and then behind closed doors, it's hell, and it's hell 24/7, and the victim is often just being very, very careful with their words, their actions. They're walking on eggshells, and they get used to that. That becomes the new norm, and they don't even realize often, especially a younger person, that, well, maybe this isn't okay, until maybe somebody on the outside starts to comment or more makes them aware of what's going on. And they also just feel like, even if I say something, like, nobody sees this except for me. It's only happening behind closed doors. It's only happening when we're in the car or the van alone. It's only happening when we're at home alone. It's only happening when no one is within earshot or eyeshot. So what happens in these cases is either they don't think they'll be believed, or then they step forward, and because the other person, the abuser, and the abuser can be male or female. I just want to say, this is not just men who do this. There are plenty of women abusers like this. The majority are, in fact, men, and women are typically the victims. But plenty of women like this exist. So I just want to say that, because I know a lot of men in the scenario. So if they step forward and tell someone, that person typically is like, what do you mean? He's a good father, or he's so loving to you. He bought you that, whatever. He helped you make your van. He's on the road with you posing for pictures. He set up your blog, or he, like, whatever. I'm not saying that that's the case here, but people will point out all the good things, and they're very reluctant to see where things have gone wrong. And it's very disheartening to be in one of these relationships and not be believed, especially when it's been years and years. And so my heart goes out to anybody in this situation. Again, I have a whole podcast about this. I've interviewed many survivors and victims and experts. There are a couple of videos here on my channel if you're watching on YouTube. The podcast is called The Audacious Life, theaudaciouslife.com if you want to go check it out. The early episodes are kind of about what this type of abuse is, from experts. Lundy Bancroft is one of the experts, and you can just listen to survivors and different things. But they're also, just look here on YouTube, just type in narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse, and control. It's out there. So I'm excited to see that Gabby's life was not in vain, and that this is all bubbling to the surface, and that it's very, like, starkly glaring that there is just a huge gap in knowledge about this type of abuse. It's really extremely hidden. People often misunderstand it. Just as with happened to Gabby, the victim is often blamed. It's very, very common. And so hopefully this death, her murder, if it is her murder, I don't know, hopefully he will be found alive. Hopefully he can shed some light on what actually transpired and really explain what happened, but also explore these tumultuous relationships and how it gets amped up, and how, again, it's so hard to leave because people don't believe you, and how it's hard to get help when people don't believe you, including the police, including the body language experts, right? Like, this poor girl could have been saved. It's just heartbreaking. So if you know somebody in a relationship that looks like this, and this sounds familiar to you, they're maybe being more and more isolated. They're being controlled. Like, at one point, he took away her driver's license so she couldn't go line dancing with one of her good friends. Again, locking her out of the van, doing these things that are really pretty extreme, but also just that continual dismantling of her ego and self-esteem, never really truly encouraging, maybe faking and playing along publicly, but behind the scenes not being supportive at all. And then again, that isolation, keeping this person away from friends and family who could build them up and give them confidence and maybe listen if something did go wrong. And I guess the main thing, I have another video that's not up about this, is just all it takes really is one person to believe and validate what's going on. So if somebody comes to you and says, you know, I see myself in Gabby. I think that's me and my boyfriend, or me and my girlfriend. Believe them. Just ask them. Just say, I'm here to listen. Like, what can I do to help you? And don't push them to do anything. You know, they can call 1-800 the hotline. That's a domestic violence hotline, or thehotline.org. Or you can go there yourself and you can try to learn what some of the cycles of abuse are, the signs of abuse, and figure out what you can do to best support them. They can call, check, chat, text, whatever, and they will give you support. They'll listen. They can give you some ideas on how to help. But the main thing is, you don't need to leave and label it abuse. Just say, how can I help you get out of this? This sounds exhausting. It sounds like you deserve better. It sounds like you've tried so hard and you're a good person. Like, you know, all the things that you think are true, assuming they're a good person. So in these relationships, sorry about that, in these relationships, even if you're that one person, you can help, but it can be draining, because oftentimes the average is women go back 8 times before they leave permanently. 8 times. So they could boomerang back because of that trauma bond, which is like a drug. It's literally a biochemical reaction within your body. You like crave the circumstances, the person, and you want to go back. And I've seen it myself. I've seen it with my friends and women that I care about, and it's really hard. It's their choice to go back. So not judging, just trying to understand that you're not failing by being the person who's helping them, and you're not their savior. You're just there to listen and validate. But just keep on being there. Keep on being there for them, even if they go back 8 times. And just say, what can I do? This keeps happening. Don't rub it in, but acknowledge reality. Say it once, see what they say, and just try to be there for them. And see what they say in the domestic violence groups, that you can join one, you can call, talk to people, say, what should I do to help, get more advice, and just being that one person who validates is hugely important. And hopefully more people will learn about this hidden type of abuse. It is insidious. It's really everywhere. You would be shocked at how many women are in this situation. I know I was, when I started recording this podcast and telling people about it in Facebook groups, on the street, playgrounds, moms, they were like, oh, that's me, or that was me, that's my sister, that's my aunt, that's my, my college roommate, that's whoever. And my sister, it seemed like everybody had somebody in their life who was going through this, and I just didn't know how prevalent it was, and it's prevalent. So chances are you are that person, or somebody like that, and if it's you, please take care of yourself. Please, knowledge is power. You can learn a little bit more about it. You can reach out for help. You can try to find that one trusted person who will believe you. And I would say try your best to get some support. And I'm just saying so many prayers for you, for her family, and just hoping that he returns so that, again, we can learn more about what really transpired and shed some light on the subject, and hopefully eventually put an end to this, so there's more education and people can avoid these types of relationships, and that friends can kind of see the cycle and see the signs, police officers, experts, whatever, and it'll be easier to kind of pull people out once they're getting sucked in. You get sucked in so far, and it's hard. It's really tricky to get out. Not impossible, but it is really tricky. And then the healing, once you are out, can take years, decades. You have to find the right people to work with you, the right modalities, experts. You can heal on your own. It takes a lot of time. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about this. I don't really have a lot more to say, except if you want to hear firsthand, I just did an episode on breaking free from one of these relationships with 2 different people. One was married. The other one, just before that, the last 2 episodes on The Audacious Life, Katrina Sorrentino talks about how she got sucked into one of these relationships, and her friend helped her get out, and then she went back, and now she's out for good. She just made a documentary called titledocumentary.com, titledocumentary.com. And she's a young woman, not unlike Gabby, a bit older, but similar scenario. So, yeah, anyway, thank you for listening. If you can help someone out, please do. If you know that this is something that can help them, please share this or find other sources to share. But that's all I want to say. All right, thanks.